Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalrin, and in today's video, I want to give you guys a kickstart guide for Assassination Rogues this early into Battle for Azeroth. Now this guide is not going to be complete because we don't have the raids open yet, we don't have a lot of the content unlocked yet, but hopefully this guide will at least get you guys kickstarted in playing Assassination Rogues. I honestly don't know why I don't see a lot more Assassination Rogues. They're actually in a very good spot. They are a little bit gear dependent currently compared to, let's say, Outlaw, but they're still so enjoyable and super fun to play. Assassination Rogues are looking very solid, and in BFA currently, they could have been a lot worse off. But the way that they're set up, and with how easy their traits are to manage compared to some of the other specs, I feel like Assassination have a pretty good head start in Battle for Azeroth. So let's talk a bit about the spec and know everything you need to know. Let's start with our talents. In the first row, you have Master Poisoner, which is the easy option, and is the best currently. The other two are not terrible in terms of damage. Blindside is a good alternative to Master Poisoner if you just like a variety in your rotation and want to have a little more oomph in your burst at the very end when your enemy starts dying. This one is not a terrible one, but with your secondary stats with haste and crit, when you go for Blindside and you don't have enough of haste, you might start feeling sluggish. If that is the case, stay Master Poisoner. Elaborate Planning has opportunity for a bit extra AoE damage, especially if you're able to use that with our Fan of Knives to buff the damage by 10% as you keep spinning your fan over and over and over. It has potential as well, but with low amount of haste, if you don't have enough haste and crit in order to maintain this buff, it just will be kind of a detriment to you. Again, Master Poisoner if you're not sure about these two. At level 30, Night Stalker is a decent option, but not really useful in most cases. It has some very specific combinations, but unless you're using this out in the world just to move around faster, this one is not the best option. Subterfuge ends up being the best currently, increasing the damage of your garrote, simply seeming better than others. Master Assassin can be used in heavy AoE situations if you're trying to mass AoE enemies, but if you're not trying to go for big burst AoE, Subterfuge ends up being the only option. At level 45, it's really a question between Vigor and Deeper Strat. Vigor ends up being the most flexible out of all the options. Deeper Strat can have some niche variety and uniqueness when it comes to AoE damage. Like, let's say you have 2, maybe 3 targets, and you're just trying to make sure to maintain the bleeds on them for as long as possible. You can actually get some value damage off of like a 2-3 target cleave, but for most situations, Vigor ends up being the best option. At level 60, it's a question between Leech and Poison and Cheat Death. Cheat Death the best for PvE progression, but Leech and Poison is a good alternative. At 75, this is going to be your own choice. What kind of utility do you want? In the long run, I feel like Prey in the Wake ends up being the best one if you're going for group content, especially in dungeons. Increasing enemies to take damage by 10% from your cheap shots and kidney shots allows you and your party to clear certain mobs in Mythic Plus dungeons. At level 90, this isn't really an option for you. It's really a question of what you pick at the top. Right now we're playing a poison heavy build, so we're gonna have to go with Toxic Blade in this row. If you are going for Elaborate Planning, then Exsanguinate can work, but again, very secondary stat reliant, so if you don't have enough secondary stats, you might not even want to look at this option. If you're going for Blindside, Toxic Blade and Exsanguinate are looking a lot closer. At level 100, since we are playing a poison build, which is the easier build and the one that's actually doing the most amount of damage if you don't have proper perfect stats for the spec, then Poison Bomb will be the best option, good for cleave as well as single target. Hidden Blade has a very interesting combination with Night Stalker, where you're able to stack up Hidden Blade, and if you're trying to burst AoE a bunch of enemies at the same time, especially for enemies that die very quickly, Hidden Blades with Night Stalker can work, but generally not the best option. Crimson Tempest has potential to be the strongest in pure AoE, but it does have some drawbacks. Without enough haste to maintain you with your ruptures and your garrotes, Crimson Tempest doesn't actually increase the amount of energy you get from any of their ticks. Some of your other bleeds do. It has the most potential damage for big AoE in terms of huge group of enemies, but outside of big AoE, it's not really that useful. Let's also talk a bit about some of the traits. Some of the best traits right now for Assassination is Shrouded Suffocation. This one is simming the best right now, so you want to pick up at least one of these, and these do not stack. I've been trying out because I have 3 pieces of gear that have Shrouded Suffocation. Whether I go for 1 piece, 2 piece, or 3 piece, this trait doesn't stack. I'm learning as I'm doing Assassination that certain traits stack and certain traits don't, and I've been playing the Outlaw since so far, and I am pretty sure I noticed all of my traits stacking for Outlaw. Although I am not getting as much variety of different traits for Outlaw, so it's not like I really have the gear to test, but for Assassination I got a little bit lucky. Get yourself one Shrouded Suffocation, and from there on, you don't really have a lot of good traits for Assass that are worth snagging. A lot of the middle ground traits like Resonance, Fury, and even something like Inside the Pack are actually fairly decent, so most of the middle ground specs and traits are going to be a lot stronger. There is one trait, however, that is actually somewhat viable for Assassination, and that trait is going to be the one that I find eventually, and that trait is Twist the Knife. This one can have some potential, but it does have a little bit extra side text to it. Envenom deals additional damage per common point spent, which is nice, and Envenom lasts a second longer when it critically strikes. The crit strike aspect to it with low amount of crit just doesn't synergize well together. So a lot of the middle ground traits are going to be your go-to. Of course, there's going to be a website in the description below for you guys to check out which traits are simming currently for Assassination pre-raid content. Alright, let's get the basics of Assassination done from the rotation. So you have 2 bleeds that you gotta maintain. One of your bleeds is going to be a Garrote. You want to maintain that at all times. The other is going to be a Rupture. Make sure your poisons are always on, by the way. There's going to be 2 bleeds that you got to maintain on your targets. One is Garrote, the other is Rupture, and you want to refresh Garrote at about 3 seconds, and Rupture you want to refresh at about 6 seconds to maximize the effectiveness. Outside of refreshing your dots, keep spamming Mutilate and generating common points, and using Envenom whenever you do not need to refresh your common points. Vendetta and Toxic Blade are very easy to use. I'm not going to talk about how I'm using them, in day-to-day basis. You just press them as soon as they're off of cooldown to do damage. But they do have a combination of how you want to get your openers and what kind of damage you want to be able to get in your openers when you're going for a good, strong damage. So you're trying to, in the opener, maintain your trait for Shrouded Suffocation for as long as possible, together with Subterfuge, so it'll deal more damage. So you are going to want to vanish and refresh it at some point, hopefully during your Vendetta, to get the most amount of value. Your opener is going to look like this: Garrote, Mutilate, Rupture, Vendetta, Mutilate, Toxic Blade. Hopefully you have the common points in Venom, and keep building common points up until you have 4 or 5 and keep hitting Envenoms. And right as you go towards that 3-second mark, you will want to get the Vanish and Refresh in there. And that's about it. After that, your opener is done, and now you're back to your good old rotation of trying to build common points and trying to spend them as much as possible. Now let's talk a little bit about AoE. When there's 2 or more targets, you're going to stop using Mutilate completely and just going to start spamming Phantom Knives to generate your common points. You want to make sure to get Garrotes on 3 targets in your opener in order to get the most value out of your Subterfuge as well as your trait, Shrouded Suffocation. You want to maintain Rupture on up to 3 targets, but past that, after you have Rupture on 3 targets, you can just start dumping the rest of your common points into Envenom or Crimson Tempest if you do end up going Crimson Tempest. The rest of the time, just keep spamming Phantom Knives and use Vendetta whenever it's available on any of the targets. So it's going to look something like this. You're going to Garrote, 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 drop a Vendetta, or drop Rupture, start spinning Knives, you have your common points. Do you Garrote enemies while you have them in AoE? I personally don't. What I like to do is just to maintain my Rupture on them for as best as possible, trying to make sure it doesn't fall off, trying to rotate my common point building from target to target, and trying to throw down my dots whenever they're available. If you do have Vanish, for example, ready very soon, what you can do is Vanish and triple Garrote those 3 targets afterwards. So let me get my 3 Ruptures back up, and I'm just going to pull some energy. Now I'm down to pulling energy, and I'm going to get triple Garrote on these 3 targets. And then back to Phantom Knives. And back to refreshing my Rupture if I need to. With low amount of haste and low amount of crit, you might notice that you're not generating as many common points as you might have in previous expansions. This is normal for Assassination, it's just something that you kind of have to play around with. With better stats like paste and crit, you will be able to get more value out of your abilities, and with certain procs, you'll be able to see your damage rise a lot higher. And as the general playstyle for Assassination when it comes to AoE, whether it's one target, whether it's 2 targets, 3 targets, or however many targets you're going to AoE in. And that's about all the basics you need to know about Assassination, at least currently. As the expansion goes on, we will get more content, we will get more gear, and there will be more updates to come for Assassination. Honestly, I'm surprised that I don't see the spec nearly as often as I was hoping I should, because it's actually kind of a fun spec. It is enjoyable to play, and I think a lot of you guys would like it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.